This video contains strong adult language, may not be suitable for children or sensitive people. Boom boom.
FedEx Field. Look, I don't care what they change the name of this field to, Northwest or whatnot. It's still fucking FedEx Field, okay? And if you thought that MetLife had a cursed injury history, it's well documented about this place snatching people's legs and nearly trying to kill them. Literally. Joe Burrow, ACL. Alday Peterson, ACL. RJ3, ACL. Chase Young, ACL. Kyle Allen, leg. Ryan Fitzpatrick, hip. And the absolutely most frightening injury of maybe all time, Alex Smith, his entire leg was thrown into an industrial shredder. You had scandals in the building, ticket scams, rails collapsing, sewage drains, clogged toilets, a 1-3 playoff record for the Commander Skins, who are 106, 1-19, and 1 here overall. Jack Kent Cooke opened the place in 1997 and then immediately died, giving way to one of the worst owners in NFL history, Dan Snyder. I mean, Dan Snyder, same difference. The Washington Commander Skins. For their insanely long history, the Commander Skins don't necessarily have a statue-worthy TD. And we know how well they do with statues. Last year's Hail Mary is up there, but I have to go with John Riggins in Super Bowl 17. Down 3 points in the fourth quarter, Washington was involved in a grueling drive where they desperately needed points. Facing a 4th and 1 on the Miami 43, it was do or die, and do they did. Riggins not only converted the 4th down, but he took the ball to the house, scoring a go-ahead TD and fueling the Redacteds to a 27-16 win, their first Super Bowl victory. Washington Commanders. Oh, you changed your name and you're still racist. I can't even call you by your old name because YouTube will demonetize the video for even saying it. Actually, that is a fucking joke. Yep, the culture is damn good.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Dan Snyder was your owner. I have to throw that in your face because somehow that's your fault as a fan, little buddy. Northwest Stadium themed suites. Yes, FedEx Field is now Northwest Stadium, named after Kanye West's daughter. I don't know. Y'all, can you stop changing the names of all these stadiums? I'm not gonna use Paycor or Acrisure or whatever Northwest is just because your name is on a stadium. Sorry, that was a side rant. Since it's still one of the worst arenas in the league, even after mild renovations were performed, the stadium had to get creative to find people to actually spend money on their luxury suites. So they offer 3 different themed boxes. One for team legends, one for the military, and an arcade theme. So when the Commanders are losing, you can pass the time by playing foosball or air hockey. And it's smart to do a military one since there are so many Beltway bandits circling the area with cash to spend. The Sean Taylor statue also removed, which was one of the weakest efforts ever by, you know, that jackass Dan Snyder. Dude was so cheap, he didn't even give Sean Taylor an actual body. Northwest Field, Landover, Maryland. We don't know what's going to happen to Northwest Field in 6 years when it's finally replaced. However, before it was built in 1997, it was a dairy farm, specifically the Wilson Dairy Farm in Landover, Maryland. Jack Kent Cooke bought the land and then tried to rename the area Raljon after his 2 sons. Kent promptly died and never actually saw a game there. And nobody calls the town Raljon, it's freaking Landover.
Washington. Oh, look, it's Robert Griffin III doing a stanky leg with his knee. He probably would have been your franchise quarterback for the next decade or so, but he was a gimmick quarterback and he couldn't read defenses, and that was quickly exposed once he got hurt. But you guys, again, you guys all know that. How about you guys finally getting rid of Dan Snyder, and you do all this crap, you get rid of Dan Snyder, and you make it back to the NFC Championship game, and you upset the Detroit Lions, and everything is great, and then you get your fucking ass kicked, belt to ass. 32-point loss to the Eagles, and this is as good as it's gonna get. This is as good as it'll get for you guys, because Jaden Daniels is already 40 years old. Like, there's not, like, this is as good as it's gonna get for you. And Jaden Daniels, whatever, he's an okay player, but it's just making the conference championship game is not something that's easy to do, even though the Chiefs make it look easy. Okay, it's not. So you guys think, oh, we'll be back here every year. No, you're not. No, you're not. This was your chance. This was your chance, and you blew it. You blew it big time with fumbles and not being able to execute offensively. And finally, I hate to say this, but Sean Taylor was just overrated. Tragic story, but he was overrated. And finally, the biggest need for Washington is their pass rush. They had no consistent pass rush, but also, you know, the Commanders, which defense was their biggest weakness all year, despite Jaden Daniels and their offense being great and being a surprise. They allowed 4.8 yards per carry last year, which is not really, you know, a pass rush thing, but still, they need something defensively. I say pass rush, but really defensively all around. They need some help because that's the biggest reason. I mean, when you give up, whatever, 55 fucking points in a game, which they did in the NFC Championship game, yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement there. And finally, the Washington Commanders, 1981. When you think of those 80s Redskins teams, oops, I said a naughty word. When you think of those 80s Redskins teams when they won 3 Super Bowls in a 10-year span, you think of the Hogs. You think of their offensive line. And that's, in this draft, that's where they got 2 of the Hogs, Mark May and Russ Grimm. Russ Grimm is in the Hall of Fame. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time first-team All-Pro. Mark May was a Pro Bowler. But it wasn't just that. Dexter Manley was a defensive end. He was an All-Pro player that they drafted in the 5th round and a Pro Bowler. Charlie Brown, no, not the cartoon. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler at wide receiver. Darrell Grant and Clint Didier were also contributors to some of their Super Bowl teams as well. If you want to know why Washington was one of the best teams in the NFL in the 80s, a good place to start looking would be the 1981 draft. And finally, the Washington Commanders, Albert Haynesworth, 2009. If you want to look at arguably the worst contract in NFL history, this could be it. Albert Haynesworth, after back-to-back All-Pro seasons in Tennessee, signed a 7-year, $100 million contract with $41 million guaranteed for the then Redskins. And not only was he a disappointment on the field as he couldn't stay healthy and he just did nothing but bitch and moan and he failed the conditioning test and he just insulted everybody. For $100 million and $41 million guaranteed, the Redskins got 20 games out of him and 6.5 sacks while also being lazy as fuck. And that was always the worry about Haynesworth. He had the talent to be a Hall of Famer, but he only gave a shit during contract years, which is why when his contract years came up with Tennessee, he dominated and fooled the team into giving him a crap load of money, which is exactly what Dan Snyder did because Dan Snyder was a fucking idiot. And if you're going to pay Albert Haynesworth $100 million, then you basically deserve what you get, and that's exactly what Washington got. Nothing. And finally, we get to Dan Quinn. It's pretty safe to say that Dan Quinn last year was not very well received as a hire, but he surprised everybody, along with Jaden Daniels, in being the nice, sweet underdog story of the season, much like CJ Stroud and the Texans were the year before. They made it all the way to the NFC Championship game where they got 55 points dropped on their fucking faces by my Eagles. It was glorious. This is what Washington does. Washington will have a good season every 3 or 4 years where they overachieve and then they go back to being dog shit. Now, I don't know if that'll happen again because Jaden Daniels does seem to be the real deal. And again, if you have a good quarterback in this league, you're always going to be in contention. But this is Washington. Shit always goes wrong. Even as an Eagles fan, even if Washington becomes a consistent 9-10 win type of team, their defense is horrible. Jaden Daniels might be good for the future, but as an Eagles fan, I'm not afraid of him. But either way, that's not what this video is about. The video is about what is Dan Quinn's job security like, and after leading the Redskins, oops, I meant the Commanders, to their best season in basically 30 years, his job security is about as good as anybody. I'm going to say he has a 1 out of 5 hot seat ranking. And that's all, folks. And finally, Washington Commanders, Quan Martin. Quan Martin's the 2nd overall pick from 2023, and last year he had 87 tackles and an interception. He also had a pick 6 in the playoffs when the Commanders had their surprise run to the NFC Championship game where they got ass blasted by my Eagles. Now, as we all know, the Commanders' offense is truly special, but their defense is very, very doo-doo. But if Quan Martin can improve the way I think he can, then the Commanders can become special. Honestly, I don't really fully believe, or I'm not very bullish on this particular pick because there's so many problems with Washington's defense. It's more than one player. But if I had to pick one player to become a notable star on that side of the ball for Washington, besides Frankie Luvo, it would be Quan Martin. And finally, Washington Commanders, Terry McLaurin. McLaurin is a fan favorite. Everybody loves Scary Terry. He's a good player. He's a consistent player, durable, right? And last year was the first year of his career where he caught more than than 7 touchdowns in a season. He had 13 touchdown catches last year. He has a couple really nice highlight catches over the course of his career, but he's never been a dominant receiver. He's never broken 1,200 yards in a season. Last year, like I said, he had 13 touchdown catches, which is amazing, but is he going to duplicate that? Maybe, maybe not. He's currently in some contract disputes with the franchise and the front office, so who knows? Jaden Daniels might have been a godsend for his career, but like I said before, where Garrett Wilson was like the Kevin Durant of Terry McLaurin's, like Terry McLaurin is the Terry McLaurin of Terry McLaurin's. He's like a guy who is in that top 10 to 15 range that some people overrate, right? Because of some nice highlight. He's a very good receiver. I don't think he's a great receiver, but would I like him on the Eagles? Absolutely. But still, overall, compared to the way some of the media talks about him, I think he's a little bit overrated, and he gets the nod here. And finally, Washington Commanders, Tyreek Evans. I mean Jaden Daniels. Simply put, great talent who had a great rookie season. He's a little bit old. He's a little bit overrated by some people off of just one season. I've seen, people rank him as he's already a top 5 quarterback in the league. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. Okay, we literally just saw this with CJ Stroud, where he had this historically great rookie year and then he regressed. I think Daniels is better than Stroud, and I don't think he'll regress the way Stroud did, but again, that's why they play the games, right? The other part is, and this is, again, I've talked throughout this video about linear progress. We all like to think, oh, well, we're gonna go from being bad to mediocre to good to great, and that's how it works. That's how it works with teams, that's how it works with players, and that's not the case. And I personally think Washington is a textbook example of a team that overachieved. They got to the conference championship game last year. They got their ass kicked by the Eagles, yours truly, by 32 points. We scored 55 points on them, right? And so that kind of, I think, maybe sped up expectations to the point now where in the long run it might actually hurt Washington, because I know they signed Von Miller and they have Bobby Wagner or whatever, but their defense isn't good. And the whole Terry McLaurin, I expect him to be there, but basically Washington, Jaden Daniels very well might be good, but who knows if he's going to get the same amount of breaks, right? Because they were lucky to beat Tampa Bay in the wild card round last year. If not for that fumble, deep in Tampa territory by the Bucs, they probably lose that game. So I don't know. Again, you never know on a year-by-year basis with the NFL. So his defense, to me, I think that basically what I'm trying to say is, if you're just expecting him to waltz to the conference championship game every year now because he did it as a rookie, that's not how it works, right? So the expectations might be raised a little bit too high. And also, he shares a division with the Eagles, who are primed to be, along with the Chiefs, the best team in the league for the foreseeable future. So that could very easily stop him from getting to more Super Bowls. And guess what? The Eagles have already stopped from getting to a Super Bowl, which they did last year. Overall, though, I hope his mom doesn't come after me. I have his Prove It rating as a 7 out of 10, and that's all I have to say about that.
The Washington Redskins. I don't need to lecture you about the reputation of their franchise under Dan Snyder. They were a shithole. A walking joke that nobody took seriously and everyone wanted to go away. Years upon years of embarrassment and scandal. Sheer neglect of franchise, stadium, and local relations, yet they felt they were winning off the field. The best way to emphasize that?
How would you describe the culture surrounding this football team?
The culture is actually damn good.
It never gets old. The sheer arrogance of that comment. Everyone knew it was bullshit, and Bruce Allen's reasoning for it was the basic things that every team did. If you can even call it that. Digging further than rock bottom sapped fan interest in corporate support. A hotbed of cronyism and ego stroking. Dan fought tooth and nail to keep that franchise. He ran it into the ground, fostered an environment more toxic than Chernobyl, and drove Washington into a shit-filled sewer leak. That also happens to be FedEx Field. Every week was a different scandal or drama, and Dan's solution was to drag out Sean Taylor's corpse in some insanely half-assed tribute in poor taste. Or change the name of the team to something so bland and uninspired it led to more criticism. Or escape on a yacht for months on end to escape congressional inquiries. Even in his final hours, he would stomp his feet and beg to keep his abused baby until it was pried away by protective services. It would be the best thing to ever happen to that franchise. The Commanders over the last few years are a testament to a tried and true philosophy. Organizational success starts at the top, proving the benefits of even halfway competent ownership on the fortunes of a franchise. It's only been 2 years since the sale. For the commies, it's gone from a bloodbath to a red dawn. A land full of glories all their own. All you need to look at are 3 facets of the team: on-field performance, organizational culture, and off-field relationships. This was the challenge facing Josh Harris and his partners when they bought the team. For a $6 billion price tag, there was a lot of wreckage to sift through. Assessments and observations had to be made. See what worked, what didn't, and what just needed to be demolished and rebuilt. Harris does have experience in sports. He owns the Philadelphia 76ers and New Jersey Devils as well. One thing he's done to the benefit of his teams is allowed the executives to do their jobs without interference. For better or worse. In the case of the Sixers, that might have been a completely botched disaster from the moment the process started. The Devils have fared a little bit better than them in that time frame. Just a little. It should be noted that Harris isn't even considered to be one of the better owners of the NHL or NBA, yet that doesn't matter. The bar was so insanely low that a wooden twig would have been a vast improvement. But enough ranting. First aspect, on-field performance. The Redskins/football team/commies under Dan Snyder, horrible. A wasteland of burned money on free agents, changing philosophies on a whim and doing everything his way. Spoiler, his way led to frequent disaster. Damage was so widespread that all of 2023 was merely a cleanup year. Sitting around as Mike Shanahan 2.0 was revealed to be long past his expiration date as a coach. The geriatric defensive minds of him and Jack Del Rio showing that they were stuck in 2008. Which was somehow more modern than Dan's thinking was. The worst defense in football with an offense that wasn't much better. As a result, guys like Montez Sweat and Chase Young were on the way out. Sam Howell looked like the future for a few months, then he outright imploded and threw his way out of town. Probably with a terrible interception. There were some interesting pieces on the offensive side of the ball. Mainly Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin carrying anything resembling competence, but the rest was a mess. They needed a full-scale operation to come anywhere close to a playoff contender. Reality tends to be a bit less predictable in that regard.
With the second pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders select Jaden Daniels, quarterback, LSU.
It tends to happen when you select a franchise quarterback who adapts to the league off the bat. With this LSU product, they didn't just hit a home run, it was a walk-off grand slam. When the words best rookie QB in NFL history are uttered, you know a special player's in their midst. An accurate rocket arm with elusiveness and speed to boot. You talk about your Jalen Hurts? The commies have their own right here. Minus the squatting 600 pounds part. Could Hurts complete 70% of his passes as a rookie, though? Can he near single-handedly transform the offense from an afterthought into a machine? Allowing Robinson, Jahan Dotson, and McLaurin to make magic happen? It led to Washington's best season in a very, very long time. 12 wins for the first time since 1991. I'd say that was a good year for the Redskins back then. And it'd only get even better for them in January. Tampa Bay would be a very tough opponent in the wild card. Coming off a strong finish with talent aplenty, but did have some injuries in the secondary. The game would be tight to the very end. And things seemed perilous. You know what changes things? The Bucs falling on their own sword. And Jaden Daniels. And the defense holding their own. And Jaden Daniels again. A lesser talented quarterback would have had more than his towel stripped here. A total team effort with a touch of luck added in. Their first playoff win in almost 20 years. Then the true miracle. They humiliated the number 1 seed Lions in their own house the very next week. A team that overhauled their own culture issues in one fell swoop. A statement win. In one try, the commies experienced more playoff success than Dan Snyder had in his 24 years of ownership. It's fucking hilarious. Washington's magic may have run out against an Eagles machine, but it'll remain a season eternally etched in legend. Breaking free of the shackles of misery. Even if for a moment Washington experienced joy again. And that alone makes it beautiful. Next, you get to the organizational culture. Making it as far as they did was the result of not just fresh talent, but personnel changes. To be a proper owner, you can't only let people do their jobs, you must choose the right ones to lead the charge. If you don't, you just become Shot Khan. No one wants that. Before the sale, Dan Snyder was going through his Mike Shanahan 2.0 stint as mentioned earlier. Ron Rivera's head honcho was not working. At all. Time to go off the pasture, buddy. Martin Mayhew isn't a true problem, but he can go upstairs before he rides off into the sunset. A new era needs fresh thinking. And for their next GM, look to San Francisco and the forward-thinking individuals developed there. Adam Peters will be their visionary for the future. He was blocked by John Lynch, but Washington would give him the promotion that he so desired. Washington bringing in top executive prospects instead of letting them go. Crazy thought. At head coach, they chose a rather safe high-floor bet. Ben Johnson wouldn't come, so in the end they settle on Dan Quinn? Look, he had some damn good defenses in Dallas, but with how his tenure in Atlanta ended, all the choking his teams did over there, it looked like a lateral move from a sunken riverboat at first glance. But Washington ponied up and offered him strong coordinators to shore up weaknesses. Enter Cliff Kingsbury. He may have been completely unqualified to be a head coach in the NFL, but offensive coordinator better suits his strengths. What he's been able to do with a dynamic quarterback in Daniels, I'd say that move's worked out for now. Quinn brought a lot of players and personnel with him from Dallas. Longtime assistant of his, Joe Witt Jr., promoted to defensive coordinator. Plus a number of Cowboys free agents looking for a pay raise. Set the tone for the culture and let the play on the field do the rest. Once again, the bar was so low with Rivera's lost start that Quinn's been an absolute godsend. Has he really been the best coach they've had since Joe Gibbs in only 1 year? Has to be at least Mike Shanahan's here, right? I'd say those moves have worked out well for the short term. Then finally we get to the sweetest part. Off-field relationships. Building the trust between a team and local politicians and fans is paramount to any sort of success. Dan Snyder was good at one thing, and it was burning every bridge he came across. This was especially true with the fan base. Turns out that squeezing as many dollars as he could out of them while putting out a shitty product tends to ruin a team's reputation. Now, this situation will take years of recovery, and a true assessment of it isn't available at this time. But a deep playoff run tends to help with that. There's going to be that fear that things will go back to the way things were, but that's normal. Some Lions fans still deal with the same thing with their overhaul. But the team still felt out of place. Being in Maryland and the stadium completely falling apart due to neglect was a demerit. Trying to move to land in Northern Virginia felt the same way. They needed to be back in DC proper. Returning to that hallowed ground was Dan's dream for time eternal. And thanks to the strange concept of negotiating in good faith, the local government and team not only came to an agreement for a new stadium, but it will be built where the hallowed remains of RFK Stadium currently stand. A $3.7 billion shrine that'll become the envy of the area. $1 billion in public funds for infrastructure upgrades. The lack of a toxic air plus that deep playoff run finally got them more than they bargained for. Sad thing is, it's not even the worst stadium deal I've seen for taxpayers. The commies are at least paying for any cost overruns. Once complete, it'll be a dome that'll bear host to future Super Bowls, major concerts, possibly March Madness. The DC Metro's even going to be hosting the NFL Draft in 2027. A massive boon to any local economy. And a celebration of a new era of Washington football. Over 1 million fans flocking to culminate a revival to competency. Commanding the political landscape, conquering past reputations. The thing is, this ownership group isn't even going above and beyond the Call of Duty. They're just being average owners of an average team. That's how bad things were under Dan Snyder. Him merely being out of the picture has improved the health of the organization in all facets exponentially. It's the greatest ending for anyone who loves football. Danny sitting alone in a London apartment drinking scotch out of bitterness. Stewing to anyone within earshot about how unfair things were. In less than 2 years, Washington has accomplished everything Dan wanted out of his team without even trying. They had the playoff run he fancied. They got the new stadium he was whining for ages about. They're starting to bask in the glory, adulation, and respect that Dan envisioned for himself. Sean Taylor's gonna be getting a real tribute worthy of his name. It's a wonderful life if Mr. Potter was beaten with billy clubs in the end. You wanted to do so too after that movie, don't lie. The only way to stick it to him further would be changing the team name back to Redskins. You can only dream about that, unfortunately. Regardless, former Redskins and current commie fans alike hold hands and celebrate in joy. Their team finally has legitimate hope. They have some semblance of a real future. The ominous black cloud over their franchise is dissipating. A workplace without scandals popping up every month. If their winning ways on the field can be sustained isn't certain. But with someone like Jaden Daniels leading the way, there's a good chance they'll be back in the playoffs again. Probably repeatedly. Now they get weapons to add to the arsenal. Deebo Samuel on a hopeful return to form. Laramie Tunsil is an elite blindside blocker for Jaden. Javon Kinlaw at $15 million a year? Okay then. I once said that Snyder was never going to release his death grip on the team. That he'd have that franchise to run into the ground for decades to come, even with the repeated black eyes he gave to the organization. I've never been so glad to have been wrong. This ownership group is still in its infancy, yet everything is within their grasp. Early returns haven't just been good, they've been a godsend. As a wise man said, he who commands the future conquers the past. With time, Dan Snyder's reign will be a forgotten footnote to history and snarky YouTube videos. But with this group, perhaps the culture will actually become damn good.
Here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line, and the ball is caught!